So, final segment of the show with no USC game coming up this week. It's good to just step back and take a look at the Big Ten. And I have another side gig writing for College Wire, or College Sports Wire rather. It's part of the USA Today network, the Gannett Corporation, where Ethan and I write for Trojans Wire. And I was assigned to do Big Ten power rankings. I'm not having this Big Ten segment because of that, but it just kind of fits together because it's a good time to take stock of the Big Ten. Like, this league is not very good. I'm sorry. Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, the three, like, if this was the Big Ten Olympics, like, we all know who the gold, silver, and bronze medalists would be. And after that, it's a lot of uncertainty. Illinois has lost twice, but those two losses are to Indiana and Ohio State. So it's not as though Illinois has lost a game it shouldn't have lost. USC has. And, the middle of this conference is really mushy. Like, UCLA has won 3 conference games, but does anyone really think UCLA is any good? Like, UCLA is going to go play Indiana this Saturday. That we get the true measurement of the Bruins when they go to Kurt Signetti's lair in Bloomington. But, Minnesota dog-walking Nebraska, Michigan State being horrible, Penn State being 0-4 in the Big Ten. Who's the 5th, 6th, 7th best team in the Big Ten? Like, good luck with that. Good luck figuring it out and being able to say with ironclad confidence, who's really good after the top 3. Like, top 3 is clear, bottom 3 is clear. Purdue gets shut out by Northwestern. You go to the basement for that, and Michigan State and Wisconsin are total disasters. But so the top 3, the bottom 3. But what about this middle 12, Ethan Inman? Like, how do you make sense of this huge jumble in this vast, mushy middle of the Big Ten Conference so far?
Oh, yeah, I think it's going to make these next couple of months really interesting. Last year and Nebraska plays Northwestern this weekend, and I'm going to be paying close attention to it, as all USC fans should be, because USC's next opponent is Nebraska. But that's a game that I would have been pretty certain, especially because Nebraska's at home, that they would have won last year. Even though Nebraska's better this year than they were last year, I feel like that's totally, I'm not confident Nebraska's going to win after how they did last week. So there's just so many games like that. Iowa plays a lot of different, a lot of these teams play each other, like Iowa, Minnesota, who are both 3-1 in conference, and are both tied, for third place. Oregon, Northwestern, USC, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, UCLA. What a jumble of teams. What, at the beginning of the year, those teams being tied for third place in the Big Ten would have been quite people would have been shocked if you would have told them that, and then Illinois and Nebraska being worse than that jumble of teams so far in the conference, and Washington as well. I think we're going to get a lot more clearer picture once a lot of these teams play each other, I would hope. And I think it presents real opportunity for USC because, looking at the Big Ten, USC has a chance to kind of state their case as at least the fourth best team in this conference if they go out and, like I said, beat the teams that they're supposed to. Let's run through their schedule, right? They play Iowa, Northwestern, and Nebraska, and UCLA. 3 of those teams are 3-1 in conference right now. They're 3 of those teams, which it's not. I would have thought Nebraska would be one of them. It's not Nebraska. It's UCLA, Iowa, and Northwestern. Those are teams that they can, kind of help get out of their way by beating them the rest of the season. And then obviously, if they beat Oregon, great. And, they could end up having the 3rd best record in the conference. And then maybe we're talking about, them flirting with the college football playoff appearance. But it's, this is how USC starts to kind of rise in the conference rankings. Is taking advantage of this year. Anytime there's a year like this where the stuff is up for grabs, seemingly, I think they need to take advantage of it, especially against lesser opponents. So, and whatever team does that, whether it's USC or another team, is going to be in really good standing, not just for this year, but for next year as well.
Well, I think it's really interesting just because of how much parity there is. And I mean, you could say, like, you could make the argument as the Big Ten slowly starting to turn to the Big 12. There's a case to be made because the Big 12's defining characteristic is parity. And parity, at least just when you're a casual fan just watching a game, just being like, wait, this could go either way. I thought there was a clear favorite. It just makes it much more entertaining, much more exciting. You don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of like the NFL. I mean, just in that regard. And I think it's what makes the sport great is when you can, like, not know, even if there is something like, oh, UCLA is supposed to get walloped by Penn State and they pull off the upset, or Penn State's supposed to wallop Northwestern. Another upset. James Franklin's out. Like, that sort of stuff is just really entertaining, makes great storylines all year long. But I think it also at the same time does come with a cost. Parity also makes it harder for you to have clear-cut teams. Oh, I mean, you have your 3 clear-cut teams, but is a 4th one going to emerge that can really prove to be a feasible college football playoff contender? And I think also I want to talk about this point because I want to look at the bigger picture of what the Big Ten is trying to do with what happens next with this playoff expansion. Because obviously the SEC and Big Ten, as we all know, basically get to call the shots on what happens. But the SEC, to the surprise of the Big Ten, is like, we should do 5 and 11, not this ridiculous automatic qualifier model, which, for the record, I am absolutely against. I think you got to earn it on the field either by being one of the top 5 champions or an at-large team within the rankings that are deemed that the commit based on number with the remaining spots. You got to fill with at-larges. You can't just be doing this stuff and literally for this reason. So if the Big Ten is trying to get some sort of push some automatic qualifier model in, and I mean, there's the one ridiculous 24-28 with like 7 spots each to the SEC and Big Ten, which I think that's too big. I think honestly 12 is good. I can see 16, but it's got to be just pretty much 4 more at-larges. And the Big Ten in some ways is hurting itself by doing this. Even if they do maybe have the best 2 teams in the country who could end up playing for the national title, and let's just bear with me, Ohio State and Indiana, even if one of them wins the whole thing, just their presence and them not having as many teams in the SEC looking like they could ram 4, possibly 5 teams in there this year, it definitely makes the case for the SEC's model, especially when the Big 12 and ACC, even if they kind of just have to not accept a second-tier status, are also siding with the SEC's model. So I really find it interesting, not just for what's going to happen this year in terms of how many teams the Big Ten gets in the playoffs, but what happens in the next edition of the playoff if and when it gets expanded, and if that even does happen. So I'm really interested to see like what happens and how this affects the Big Ten's leverage in the negotiations with the SEC and the other conferences as they discuss with ESPN what the new format will be if it does change at all in 2026.
Yeah, I'm all for rewarding conference championships. You play most of your games against, your known opponents in your backyard. It's the vast majority of the schedule. But like anything, there just should be some guardrails. Like, I don't want to punish conference champions, but, here's the parallel. Like in the NFL, we've seen teams with losing records win, the NFC South, or just a really bad division. They get in the playoff. If you're 8-1, you don't deserve to go to the playoff. You didn't win a majority of your games. So there should just be strings attached. If you win your conference and you're 9-3, no, you don't get an automatic bid. If you win your conference and you are at least 10-2, you get an automatic bid. Like, you just need to attach a few stipulations, qualifiers, and we could make a better system. But I just hate this blanket. You win your conference, you're in. But okay, what if you're 8-4? And that could certainly happen in like the Big 12, or maybe Miami loses a couple more games in the ACC. Like Clemson was a 3-loss ACC champion last season, but got in because of the automatic qualifying provision. I don't like that. You need to win more games. No, you can't just be playing FCS cupcakes, of course, and you can have regulations on that. Like, you're only allowed one FCS opponent. If you have 2 FCS wins, like you don't meet that, the 10-2 threshold, you'd have to go 11-1. Just we can just put in guardrails. But anyway, Crash, I promised you that we would talk more about USC Notre Dame relative to this Big Ten conversation, relative to the college football playoff. What I just can't get around, and people can say that Notre Dame should just sign the USC agreement. Notre Dame should just adhere to USC's wishes. And like in a perfect world, that's what would happen. But we know this is not a perfect world, and I would just kind of like to think that USC, why worry so much about the logistics of this thing? And not that they're irrelevant, but that. First off, you need to have a program that's good enough to make the playoff no matter what. Like if USC has a 2005 or 2004 caliber team, it's not going to matter when Notre Dame is on the schedule, right? Like that. Just there are certain things that matter most, and there are certain things that matter secondarily, that are lower on the totem pole. If USC is just kicking butt left and right, 34-game winning streak, and we're playing conquest every week, who cares? All this stuff doesn't matter that much. It's not entirely irrelevant, but it certainly takes second place. And like that's people think I'm too negative on Lincoln Riley, but you know what? When you look at the soft product on the field, and you kind of sense this hemming and hawing about, well, if we play Notre Dame, that could complicate things. Like, I don't want to hear about complications. I want to hear about putting the boot on the throat of the opponent and winning a bleepity-bleeping big road game for once. Like, that's what's supposed to matter most. But, so like we're coming off this Notre Dame game, and Crash, you expressed the worry, which is widely felt and shared, that, is this going to be it? And my response is, boy, USC, just be good. Be good at what you're supposed to be good at. And let everything else fall into place. It just speaks to so much insecurity. I get, going to bat for athletes and making sure the logistics are not wildly irresponsible. But you know what? This isn't about that. We haven't won in South Bend since 2011. If we had been winning regularly in South Bend, are we really having this conversation? I don't think so. Crash Collier.
Well, you actually brought up an interesting point of just, just stepping on the boot of your opponent. And just like, it reminds me of what Ed Orgeron said when he was at LSU. Like, I've talked about this a lot with my dad. We talk a lot as just sports and stuff, trade ideas. It's really fun, like, especially at breakfast. We talk about this stuff a lot after we go surfing. But I remember he loves bringing this point up about what Coach O said when he was at LSU I think it was after he was interviewed and they won the SEC. He's like, Coach, do you care where we play? He's like, no, just send them our way. And then also Pete Carroll is just like, Pete Carroll played tough schedules. Granted, you kind of had to even have a shot at the national championship back then. But still, Carroll was scheduling very aggressively at Hawaii, home and home with Auburn. If my memory is serving me.
Ohio State.
Ohio, yeah. But you get the idea. He was scheduling aggressive schedules in addition to Notre Dame. And not only is that schedule make fans more excited, I think, but it also is just like it shows you're not afraid to take anyone on. And that's something I kind of wish would come back. And I really, really just miss, especially after, getting to see in person how special this rivalry is, not just to the Trojan family, but also to all the Notre Dame fans out there. Like, they care about this. And I mean, just having talked to former athletes and asked questions about this rivalry, all the ones I've talked to played in the Pac-12. I've yet to interview a current USC football or former USC football player who's played since USC joined the Big Ten. It's still just interesting just hearing how much this rivalry means to them. So I think even though they didn't have that same travel logistics, it's like you're going to threaten to take that away from them. It's just really just sad. So I wish they would just, be like, all right, we're going to just schedule this aggressively. And if you know what, we want to pursue another home and home, we'll do that on top of it as well.
Ethan.
So I talked about this a little bit in the article that we were talking about earlier. And, I think that they should keep the Notre Dame game for a very, very similar reason that you said, Matt. Like, it just prepares you better for winning in the conference schedule. And that point kind of makes me, I don't really agree with it, but it makes me understand a little bit more the USC point of view that maybe you want to move it earlier in the season so you can learn those lessons sooner and, have it prepare them for conference play earlier. Because I think obviously you can learn a lot from a Notre Dame game that happens in South Bend in October when there's still 5 games left in the season. But like if you're, playing Notre Dame in the last game of the year in the Coliseum, then maybe, those lessons that you learn don't matter as much unless, you're in the playoff already or, you're headed to a bowl game. So, that I'm not as mad about that, I suppose. But I do think, like, as a larger point, they need to extend this rivalry because, like you said, you can't be afraid of people, but also because it doesn't affect your conference record. And I think, and so, kind of taking it back to the 12-team playoff era and the potential 16 playoff era, like conference record matters much more. And this is kind of actually why I'm kind of okay with them factoring in conference record much more heavily than overall record, is because if your conference record matters a lot and your overall record doesn't really matter quite as much, then people will schedule very intriguing non-conference games. If your 3 conference games don't matter to you making the playoff, then why wouldn't USC schedule, Notre Dame and then like Georgia and like Utah or something, like why wouldn't USC schedule like the most interesting? My personal dream non-conference schedule is Notre Dame, Utah, and Oklahoma, because then that's super awesome. Like, could you imagine us playing Utah and Oklahoma in the same non-conference schedule? It would be incredibly toxic on Twitter, and I would be having the time of my life. Like, it would be awesome. And yeah, like losing would be disappointing, but if USC won, it would be fantastic. And so, teams would be more willing to take those risks, I think, if you could go 9-3, but 9-0 in conference play and make the playoff. And so that's why I'm kind of okay with the idea of, not factoring in overall record as much and it being about winning conference championships. I also think that if you, factor in overall record as much and it's more about the standings, then like teams give up less easily. Like, the thing about Clemson, where I'm okay with them making the playoff, is like they didn't give up on their season. Like they kept trying, they kept fighting, they kept trying to make the conference championship game and then win the conference championship game so they can make it in the playoff. Like if they don't really have a path with 3 losses, then maybe they start, playing their freshmen earlier in the season. They start, just kind of looking towards the future. And it's not like the NFL. Like in college, every game matters anyway, and you should be motivated to play every game anyway. But it is still, there are still things that you can do to kind of like punt on this year and look towards next year. So I think, making it more about the conference standings and less about the overall record does that in my head. But yeah, I do think, taking it back to the USC Notre Dame rivalry, like this is only a game. And actually, who made some great comments about this rivalry? This is something I forgot to mention. I was going to mention at the beginning of my whole spiel on this, is Zach Hansen actually came out and said, really like this could end up being good for us. And, there's oftentimes a lot more that you can learn from losing than winning. I was like, thank you, Zach Hansen. That's what I said on Sunday. That's what I've been, kind of preaching to the choir, is that this is a non-conference loss and USC is still very much in the Big Ten race. And now what they need to do is learn and move forward. And so that's the kind of, and, someone on that coaching staff knows how to talk about it because, Zach Hansen did it. So that's kind of the attitude that I want to see, is like being unafraid to play them in the sense that, they feel like they can win and they're confident. Like you need to make championship winning decisions before you can win the championships. Like if you need to make the confident choice that I'm going to play these teams and I'm confident that I can get my team ready to beat them before you can get your team ready to beat them. Like if you're playing like, oh, we're just going to kind of, ice skate our way into the playoff around these really easy teams, then like you're going to play like a soft team. So I think you need to make those decisions and be unafraid, to go in there and win, but also be unafraid if the result is that you lose, because, I think the potential benefits could be greater than the potential drawbacks, especially as we continue to expand the playoff. So that's kind of my spiel on